Ambassador HFY of the Valori Supremacy considered himself the greatest living expert on inferior species, and he made sure everyone knew it. For 300 cycles he had studied the lesser races of the galaxy, cataloging their habits and weaknesses with careful precision that bordered on obsession. He had written 17 volumes on the subject, each one thicker than the last, and his fellow Valori treated him as a living legend among scholars. His mandibles would click with satisfaction wherever a younger diplomat asked for his wisdom, and he never missed a chance to remind them of his unmatched expertise. But of all the species he had studied, humans amused him the most. He sat now in the observation deck of the Eternal Mandate, the flagship of the Valori fleet, scrolling through intercepted human transmissions on his datapad. The soft blue glow of the screen reflected off his compound eyes as he read their stories with barely hidden contempt. His subordinate, Elith, stood nearby, waiting for her master to share whatever wisdom he had discovered today. "Come here and look at this," HFY commanded, his voice carrying the weight of someone who expected immediate obedience. Elith moved quickly to his side, her smaller frame casting a thin shadow across the deck. She peered at the screen where a human document was displayed, filled with tales of ancient warriors and bloody battles. "What am I looking at, Ambassador?" she asked. HFY let out a sound that served as laughter among his kind, a rapid clicking of his mandibles that echoed through the empty deck. "Human mythology," he explained with obvious amusement. "They tell stories of warriors who could not be killed, of soldiers who felt no pain, of armies that fought to the last breath rather than accept logical surrender. They call these tales history, but any rational species can see they are nothing but fantasy." He scrolled through more documents, pointing at various passages with one of his 4 arms. "Here they speak of something called Thermopylae, where 300 warriors supposedly held back an army of millions. Here they tell of Stalingrad, where they claimed their soldiers fought in frozen ruins until victory or death. And here," he clicked with particular amusement, "they speak of warriors called Spartans and Gurkhas, who were said to be fearless in battle." Elith studied the documents with genuine curiosity that her master did not share. "These stories seem very important to them," she observed. "Perhaps there is some truth hidden within the exaggeration?" HFY waved away her suggestion with a dismissive gesture. "You are young and naive," he said without cruelty, simply stating what he believed to be fact. "Humans are a weak species. They live barely 100 cycles before their bodies fail. Their homeworld is a death trap filled with predators, diseases, and natural disasters that would kill any sensible species within days. They have no natural weapons, no armor, no venom. They cannot even survive in the void without extensive mechanical assistance." He stood and walked to the viewport, gazing out at the stars with the confidence of someone who had never been proven wrong. "These myths they tell are nothing but a coping mechanism," he continued. "They know deep in their primitive minds that they are prey. They are small and fragile in a universe filled with greater predators. So they invent stories to make themselves feel powerful. They romanticize their own savagery because the alternative is accepting their true place in the galactic order." Elith joined him at the viewport, her reflection appearing ghost-like against the endless darkness. "But they were granted a seat on the Galactic Concord," she pointed out. "Surely that means something." HFY made a sound of disgust. "Politics and pity," he declared. "They were given that seat 50 cycles ago because the Concord wanted to appear inclusive and welcoming. It was a gesture of charity, nothing more. The humans contribute nothing of real value. Their technology is primitive. Their military is a joke. Their culture is obsessed with violence and conflict in ways that more evolved species abandoned long ago." He turned to face his subordinate directly, his compound eyes reflecting her image 1,000 times over. "Do you know what I find most amusing about humans?" he asked, not waiting for an answer. "They speak of their homeworld with longing. They call it beautiful. A planet where the ground shakes and swallows cities whole. A planet where the sky fills with storms that can level entire regions. A planet where creatures with teeth and claws hunt each other without mercy. They evolved on a world that tried to kill them every single day, and they miss it." He laughed again, the sound filling the observation deck. "It is no wonder they tell such violent stories. Violence is all they know. But stories do not win wars. Myths do not stop plasma fire. When true danger comes, humans will do what all weak species do." "What is that, Ambassador?" Elith asked. "They will kneel," Kethvaran answered with absolute certainty. "They will beg for mercy. They will offer surrender in exchange for survival. It is the logical choice, and even humans must possess some basic logic." He returned to his seat and continued scrolling through the intercepted transmissions, shaking his head at each new story he discovered. Warriors who fought until their weapons broke and then used their bare hands. Soldiers who walked into certain death while singing songs of glory. Commanders who chose annihilation over compromise. "Such obvious fantasy," he muttered. "No species actually behaves this way. It would be evolutionary suicide." Elith remained silent, but something in the human stories had captured her attention in ways she could not explain. There was a fire in these tales, a desperate determination that seemed to burn through the simple words. She found herself wondering what it would be like to believe in something so strongly that death itself became acceptable. But she kept these thoughts to herself. Her master was the expert after all. "Mark my words," Kethvaran announced with the confidence of someone who had never faced true challenge. "When the Dominion arrives, when real war comes to this corner of the galaxy, the humans will be the first to kneel. Their myths and stories will crumble like dust in the face of actual power. And I will be there to document their surrender, adding it to my collection of inferior species who learned their place." He smiled or made the expression that passed for a smile among his kind. "The humans are amusing," he concluded. "But they are not warriors. They are not soldiers. They are storytellers, nothing more. And stories cannot hurt anyone. In the cold depths of space, far beyond the range of Valori sensors, something ancient and terrible was already moving toward them. The Dominion had heard of the Galactic Concord and its peaceful members. They had studied the weak alliance from afar and found it wanting. And they were very, very hungry. But Kethvaran knew nothing of this as he sat in his comfortable chair, laughing at human myths and dreaming of the academic papers he would write about their inevitable submission. He would learn soon enough that some stories are more than just words. Some stories are warnings. The Korax Dominion came without warning, and the galaxy would never be the same. 10,000 ships emerged from fold space at the edge of Concord territory, their dark hulls blocking out the light of distant stars. Each vessel was a monument to destruction, covered in spikes and weapons that had burned civilizations to ash. The fleet stretched across the void like a wound in reality, and every sensor in 3 sectors screamed with alarm. Kethvaran was in his quarters when the first reports arrived, and he felt something he had not experienced in centuries: genuine fear. "Ambassador, you must come to the command deck immediately." Elith's voice crackled through the communication system. "The admirals are requesting all senior diplomats." He moved through the corridors of the Eternal Mandate with unusual speed, his forelegs carrying him faster than dignity normally allowed. Other Valori rushed past him in both directions, their faces showing the same confusion and terror that he himself was trying to hide. The command deck was chaos when he arrived. Holographic displays filled the air with tactical data. Red warning lights flashed from every console, and the Valori admirals were shouting orders that nobody seemed to understand. At the center of it all, a massive projection showed the approaching Dominion fleet, and Kethvaran felt his heart sink at the sight. 10,000 ships, Admiral Worth was saying, his voice barely controlled. Our entire combined fleet numbers less than 2,000. The Thessians have perhaps another 1,000. The Moravi may be 500 more. What about the other Concord members? Another admiral demanded. Running, Worth answered bitterly. The Pelians have already abandoned their colonies. The Jakari are fleeing toward the outer rim. The Concord is fracturing as we speak. Kethvaran pushed his way to the front of the gathered diplomats. What do we know about these invaders? He asked, forcing his voice to remain steady. Admiral Worth turned to him with eyes that held no hope. They call themselves the Korax Dominion. They are conquerors, destroyers, annihilators. Our records show they have burned at least a dozen civilizations to extinction over the past millennium. They do not negotiate. They do not accept surrender until resistance is completely broken. They consume everything in their path and leave nothing behind. The weight of those words settled over the command deck like a funeral shroud. What do they want? Someone asked. Everything, Worth replied. They want everything. The next few hours passed in a blur of desperate communications and failed negotiations. The Valari supremacy, true to their logical nature, made the first offer of surrender. It was the sensible choice, Kethvaran told himself. Survival required sacrifice. Pride was worthless against superior firepower. The Dominion accepted their surrender with cold efficiency, and Valori vessels were ordered to stand down and await collection. The Thessian collective did not even attempt to fight. Their entire fleet vanished into fold space within hours, fleeing toward distant galaxies where they hoped the Dominion would never follow. The Moravi Confederation tried a different approach. They sent their finest diplomats aboard a ship of peace, carrying gifts and offers of alliance. The Dominion listened to their proposals with patient silence. Then they vaporized the diplomatic vessel and everyone aboard. The message was clear. The Dominion did not want allies. They wanted subjects, slaves, and victims. Kethvaran found himself aboard a Dominion command vessel 3 days later, a guest of the conquerors. The walls were dark metal covered in strange symbols, and the air smelled of smoke and something he preferred not to identify. Elif was with him, her small form pressed close to his side as they walked through corridors that seemed designed to inspire terror. They were brought before Supreme Commander Haktaril, the leader of the invasion fleet. Haktaril was massive, even by Korax standards. His body was covered in thick plates of natural armor, and his eyes glowed with an inner fire that spoke of countless conquered worlds. He sat upon a throne made from the bones of his enemies, and he looked at the Valori ambassador the way a predator looks at something too small to be worth eating. You are the expert on inferior species, Haktaril rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. I have read your work. It amused me. Kethvaran bowed deeply, hoping his submission would keep him alive. I am honored that the Supreme Commander found my humble writings worthy of attention, he said. Haktaril made a sound that might have been laughter. You will serve me now, the warlord declared. You will advise me on the weaknesses of the remaining Concord members. You will help me understand which species will break quickly and which will require more forceful encouragement. Of course, Supreme Commander, Kethvaran agreed immediately. I live to serve. Haktaril nodded and gestured to a nearby console. Tell me about the humans, he commanded. They are the only species that has not yet responded to our demands. All others have surrendered, fled, or been destroyed. But the humans remain silent. Kethvaran felt a flicker of his old confidence return. This was his area of expertise after all. The humans are of no concern, he assured the warlord. They are a weak and primitive species. They have minimal military capability and no significant technology. They tell stories of great warriors and glorious battles, but these are merely myths designed to hide their fundamental weakness. They will surrender once they understand the true nature of your power. Actorial considered this information with patience. We have sent them our standard demands, he said. Unconditional surrender, tribute of resources, and 1/3 of their population for our labor camps. They have finally responded. He activated a display that showed a single transmission from the human homeworld. The message contained only 2 words, written in bold letters against a black background. Molen Labe, what does it mean? Actorial demanded. Cat Varan stared at the words, and something cold moved through his body. He remembered those words from his research. They came from one of the human myths he had laughed at. The story of 300 warriors who faced an army of millions. A king had spoken those words when an enemy demanded his soldiers lay down their weapons. It means... Cat Varan hesitated, suddenly unsure of himself. It means, come and take them. Silence fell over the throne room. Actoril leaned forward on his throne of bones, his glowing eyes fixed on the human message. Then he laughed, a sound like an earthquake. Primitive bravado, he declared. They cling to their myths even now. Send the first assault fleet to their nearest colony. Burn it to ash and scatter the survivors. We will teach these humans what happens to species who dare to defy the Dominion. At once, Supreme Commander. His officers responded. Ketfaran watched as orders were given and ships began to move. 800 Dominion warships turned toward a human colony called New Helsinki, ready to begin the slaughter. He should have felt satisfied. The humans were about to learn the lesson he had always known they would learn. Their myths would shatter against the reality of Dominion power, and their brave words would turn to pleas for mercy. But something nagged at him, a tiny doubt that would not go away. Those 2 words hung in his mind like a warning he could not quite understand. Come and take them. No species had ever responded to the Dominion with defiance before. What did the humans know that everyone else had missed? The Dominion's first assault fleet numbered 800 warships, and every one of them was eager for destruction. They descended on the human colony of New Helsinki like wolves upon sheep, their weapons charged and their crews hungry for slaughter. Admiral Koroth, who commanded the assault, had conquered 17 worlds without defeat. He expected this attack to be complete within hours, just another easy victory to add to his legend. Kefaran monitored the battle from the Dominion command vessel, watching the tactical displays with a Lith at his side. He expected the fight to last minutes at most. After all, what could humans possibly do against such overwhelming force? The first day of battle proved him wrong. The human defenders numbered only 40 ships against 800, yet they did not flee or surrender. They formed a defensive line around the colony and opened fire with weapons that should have been too weak to matter. Their shots struck Dominion shields and accomplished little, but they did not stop. They kept firing, kept fighting, kept holding their position while evacuation ships fled from the planet below. Why do they not surrender? Koroth demanded over the communication channel. They must know they cannot win. But the humans gave no answer except continued resistance. The second day brought confusion to the Dominion fleet. 3 human ships, their hulls breached and burning, refused to die. Instead of accepting destruction, they accelerated directly toward the Dominion formation. Their reactors went critical at the last moment, and the explosions tore through a Dominion cruiser and 2 escort vessels. They crashed their own ships into us, Koroth reported, disbelief coloring his voice. They killed themselves to damage our fleet. Kethvaran watched the footage with growing unease. He had studied human warfare, but reading about such tactics was very different from seeing them happen. By the 3rd day, the Dominion had landed troops on New Helsinki itself, and the real nightmare began. The human colonists did not behave like civilians. Men and women who should have been farmers and workers emerged from hidden bunkers with weapons in their hands. Children guided soldiers through tunnels that did not appear on any map. Old people who could barely walk still fired at Dominion troops from windows and rooftops. There are no non-combatants, a Dominion ground commander reported with obvious fear. Every single human is fighting. We killed a medical worker, and she exploded. She had bombs strapped to her body. The city of New Helsinki became a grave for Dominion soldiers. Every building was a fortress. Every street was an ambush. The humans fought from rubble and ruins, emerging from shadows to strike, and then vanishing before retaliation could find them. They set traps in their own homes, collapsed buildings on advancing troops, and turned their infrastructure into weapons. When the Dominion seized the central hospital, they found it empty of patients, but full of explosives. The detonation killed 300 Dominion soldiers and leveled an entire city block. By the fifth day, Korath had lost patience. "Burn the planet from orbit," he ordered. "We will glass the surface and take what resources survive." His ships began the bombardment, raining fire upon New Helsinki with weapons designed to sterilize worlds. Cities burned. Mountains shattered. Oceans boiled. And still the humans fought. From underground bunkers built to survive exactly this kind of attack, human soldiers emerged to continue the resistance. They launched missiles at Dominion ships. They fired weapons from craters that still glowed with heat. They sent final transmissions promising that the Dominion would regret every death. On the seventh day, the human fleet returned. They had fallen back during the bombardment, regrouping beyond the range of Dominion sensors. Now they attacked with reinforcements, 30 more ships that had traveled from distant colonies. 70 vessels against 800 seemed like suicide, but the humans did not seem to care. Catharan watched a human frigate, its captain broadcasting a message on all channels, dive directly into the reactor core of a Dominion dreadnought. The dreadnought was 3 kilometers of armored death, one of the most powerful ships in the Dominion fleet. The frigate was perhaps 200 meters long. The dreadnought broke apart in a catastrophic explosion that took 3 nearby cruisers with it. "They are insane," Belith whispered beside him. "No species fights like this." But the humans were not finished. On the 8th day, intercepted transmissions revealed something that chilled Catharan to his core. A human soldier, half her body burned by plasma fire, was still firing her weapon while laughing. Her voice was clear through the audio pickup, and she was singing between shots. She sang of something called Valhalla, a place where warriors went after death, and she seemed happy about the prospect of dying. "Is she malfunctioning?" a Dominion officer asked with genuine confusion. "Why is she expressing joy?" No one could answer. By the 11th day, the battle for New Helsinki was over. The colony was lost, its surface burned and broken, its population scattered or destroyed. Admiral Korath declared victory and began counting his losses. The numbers were impossible. 800 Dominion warships had attacked. 312 survived. 488 ships had been destroyed by a defender numbering less than 100 vessels and a civilian population that should have offered no resistance at all. On the ground, the losses were even worse. 60,000 Dominion soldiers had landed. Fewer than 20,000 remained alive, and half of those were wounded. "This is not possible," Korath transmitted to Supreme Commander Haktoril. "We won, but the cost was unthinkable. They would not stop fighting. They would not surrender. They used their own deaths as weapons against us." Catharan sat in the observation room of the command vessel, staring at the battle reports with eyes that could not believe what they were reading. Every assumption he had made about humans was wrong. Their myths were not fantasy. Their stories were not exaggeration. The tales of warriors who fought to the last breath, of soldiers who chose death over surrender, of civilizations that would burn themselves to ash rather than submit, were not primitive imagination. They were descriptions of actual behavior. "What have we done?" Elith asked in a small voice. Ketvaran did not answer immediately. He was watching a final transmission from New Helsinki, recorded moments before the last human defender was killed. It showed a man, old and bleeding, sitting in the ruins of what might have been his home. Behind him, fires burned and explosions echoed. In his hands was a weapon that was clearly empty of ammunition. But he was smiling. "You think you have won," the old man said in heavily accented Galactic common. "You are wrong. You have awakened something that was sleeping. Humanity tried to be peaceful. We tried to be civilized. We joined your concord hoping we could be something better than what we were." He looked directly at the camera, and his eyes held no fear. "But you reminded us of what we truly are. We are the species that survived an extinction-level asteroid. We are the species that tamed a world that tried to kill us every day. We are the species that has been fighting itself for 10,000 years and never stopped." He paused to laugh, blood running down his face. "You wanted war. Now you have it. And we are very, very good at war. See you in Valhalla." The transmission ended. Ketvaran finally understood, and the understanding filled him with terror. The humans had not been defeated at New Helsinki. They had been unleashed, and the Dominion had no idea what was coming next. The Dominion had never retreated in 12,000 years of conquest, and they were not about to start now. Supreme Commander Hactoriel stood in his throne room, listening to reports from the New Helsinki campaign with growing fury. The losses were unacceptable. The cost was embarrassing. A species he had dismissed as primitive prey had killed nearly 500 of his warships and tens of thousands of his soldiers. "How?" he demanded, his voice echoing off the dark metal walls. "How did simple vermin cause such damage?" Admiral Koroth, who survived the battle with his reputation in ruins, had no answer. Ketvaran stood in the corner of the throne room, forgotten by the angry warlords, but watching everything. He had spent the weeks since New Helsinki reading every piece of human history he could find, and what he discovered terrified him more with each passing day. The humans had not exaggerated their past. If anything, they had understated it. He read about their world wars, conflicts that killed millions upon millions of their own kind. He read about something called the Eastern Front, where two human nations threw soldiers at each other until the bodies piled higher than buildings. He read about nuclear weapons, devices capable of destroying entire cities, that humans had invented and then actually used against each other. These were not the actions of a weak species. These were the actions of something far more dangerous. "We will crush them," Hactoriel declared. "Assemble the full invasion fleet. 2,000 ships. We will attack their homeworld directly and burn it to ash. Without Earth, the human colonies will lose their will to fight." The order went out, and the Dominion began to move. Ketvaran watched as the largest fleet in Dominion history gathered for the assault. 2,000 warships, including 12 dreadnoughts and 100 heavy cruisers. Nothing in the known galaxy could stand against such force. And yet doubt continued to gnaw at him. He approached Elith in their quarters, his voice low and worried. "We are making a mistake," he told her. "The humans are not what I thought they were. My research was wrong. Everything I believed about them was wrong." Elith looked at him with concern. "What do you mean, Ambassador?" "I studied their stories and called them myths," Ketvaran explained. "I thought they were inventing heroes to feel better about their weakness. But I understand now that those stories were warnings. The humans were trying to tell the galaxy what they were capable of. They were saying, 'Do not wake the sleeping beast,' and we laughed at them." He began pacing, his forelegs moving in agitated patterns. Their history is a chronicle of violence unlike anything else in the galaxy. They have fought each other constantly for their entire existence as a species. They invented new and terrible ways to kill. They refined the art of war across thousands of years of practice. Elith listened in growing alarm. And the most terrifying part, Kethvaran continued, is that they were trying to stop. They joined the Concord because they wanted to be peaceful. They spent centuries teaching themselves to be gentle, to resolve conflicts without bloodshed, to put their violent nature behind them. He stopped pacing and looked at her with eyes full of fear. We did not attack a weak species, Elith. We attacked the species that had voluntarily chained its own nature. And now we have broken those chains. The fleet arrived in the Sol system 3 weeks later, emerging from fold space at the edge of human territory. Kethvaran stood on the observation deck of the command vessel, watching the tactical displays as 2,000 Dominion warships advanced toward Earth. This was it, the moment that would decide the war. Either humanity would break, or something unthinkable would happen. He saw Earth on the display, a blue and green world that looked peaceful and fragile. It seemed impossible that such a small planet could threaten the mightiest military force in the galaxy. Then the humans revealed their answer. Ships emerged from everywhere. They came from the asteroid belt, hidden among the rocks and debris. They came from the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, launching from bases built in ice and stone. They came from the dark spaces between planets, where they had waited in silence for this moment. Human vessels of every size and type filled the display. Military warships flew alongside civilian transports that had been converted into fighting platforms. Mining vessels with drilling lasers had been transformed into weapons of war. Ancient ships that belonged in museums were brought back to service, their old systems given new purpose. Where did they all come from? Hactoriel demanded. Our intelligence said their fleet was small. It was small, one of his officers replied with horror in his voice. They built this in weeks. They converted everything they had into weapons. There must be 1,000 ships out there. But it was not the numbers that made Kethvaran's blood run cold. It was what he saw at the center of the human formation. A ship unlike anything in their records emerged from behind Earth's moon. It was black as the void between stars, covered in weapons that seemed to defy physics, and it moved with speed that should have been impossible for its size. Across its hull, painted in red so bright it seemed to glow, was a single image, a snarling wolf. What is that? Hactoriel asked, his voice losing some of its confidence. Kethvaran knew. He had read about it in the human transmissions he intercepted. They call it the Fury, he answered. It is a new class of warship designed for one purpose: total destruction. The humans built it in secret, using technology they never shared with the Concord. They were saving it for a moment like this. The Fury began to move, and the entire Dominion fleet seemed to hesitate. We studied them, Kethvaran said, his voice hollow as realization crashed over him. We read their histories. We knew about their wars, their genocides, their capacity for violence. And we laughed. We thought it made them savage and primitive. He turned away from the display, unable to watch what he knew was coming. We did not understand, he continued. Those stories were not weaknesses to mock. They were achievements to fear. Humans do not fight to win. They fight until there is nothing left, of their enemies or of themselves. They have been doing it to each other for 10,000 years. They are better at war than any species in the galaxy. On the display, the Fury fired its first shot, and a Dominion cruiser vanished in a flash of light. We did not invade a primitive world, Kethvaran said, his voice breaking. We woke the species that invented total war. We challenged the masters of destruction. And now they are going to show us exactly what that means. The Battle of Seoul had begun, and the Dominion was about to learn why humans told those stories. Not to feel powerful, to remember what they were capable of, and to warn everyone else to stay away. The Battle of Seoul lasted 3 hours, and those 3 hours changed the galaxy forever. Keth watched from the observation deck as the impossible unfolded before his eyes. 2,000 Dominion warships, the greatest fleet ever assembled, faced a human force half their size and armed with weapons that should have been inferior. But nothing about this battle was what it should have been. The Fury led the human assault, cutting through Dominion formations like a blade through water. Its weapons tore through shields that had stopped entire fleets. Its speed made targeting systems useless. Where it flew, Dominion ships died in cascades of fire and twisted metal. And the Fury was not alone. Human pilots fought with a ferocity that defied all military logic. They took risks no sane commander would approve. They exploited weaknesses that should have been too small to matter. They coordinated their attacks with precision that spoke of lifetimes of practice. A squadron of human fighters, outnumbered 20 to 1, destroyed a Dominion carrier by flying inside its hangar bay and detonating their own reactors. The explosion took the carrier and everything around it. A human cruiser, its hull breached in a dozen places, refused to retreat. Instead, it accelerated directly toward Dominion dreadnought and rammed it at full speed. Both ships vanished in a blinding flash. Why do they keep doing that? A Dominion officer screamed. Why do they use their deaths as weapons? Ket could have answered, but no one was asking him. He understood now what he should have understood years ago. For humans, death in battle was not an ending. It was a statement, a message to their enemies that said, "Even in dying, I will hurt you." Supreme Commander Hak Toril tried to rally his fleet, broadcasting orders from his flagship with increasing desperation. But his ships were burning. His formations were breaking. His crews were learning a lesson that no species had ever taught the Dominion before: fear. On the human communication channels, Kethvaran heard something that made his blood run cold. The humans were singing. In the middle of battle, with death all around them, they were raising their voices in songs of war and glory. One song spoke of warriors in some place called Valhalla. Another told of standing firm until the end. A third promised that the enemy would remember this day forever. By the second hour, the Dominion fleet was in full retreat. Ships that had conquered worlds fled toward the edge of the system, their crews abandoning any thought of victory. They had come to crush a primitive species and instead found themselves facing something from their worst nightmares. But the humans were not finished. They pursued the retreating Dominion ships with relentless determination. Every vessel that slowed down was destroyed. Every ship that tried to surrender was ignored. The humans were not interested in prisoners or mercy. They were interested in a message. Supreme Commander Hak Toril's flagship, the Pride of Dominion, was the last to fall. Human Marines boarded the massive vessel in the final minutes of the battle, cutting through airlocks with fusion torches and storming the corridors with weapons blazing. Ketvaran heard the reports from across the ship. Armored humans with painted faces advancing through smoke and flame, howling battle cries that had no translation. The Dominion soldiers fought back, but they had never faced anything like this. The humans did not stop. They did not hesitate. When their weapons ran dry, they used knives. When their knives broke, they used their hands. They kept coming until nothing stood in their way. Hak Toril died on his throne of bones, surrounded by the last of his guards. The human who killed him was half the warlord's size, a woman with blood on her face and fire in her eyes. She had taken 11 wounds during the assault and refused medical treatment until her mission was complete. She buried a knife in Hak Toril's throat and twisted. Molen Lab, she whispered as the Supreme Commander died. "We came and took them." The battle ended. 1,800 Dominion ships had been destroyed. The greatest military force in known history had been shattered by a species that was supposed to be weak and primitive. The survivors fled into fold space, carrying tales of horror that would spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Cat Varan was found in the observation deck after the fighting stopped, unharmed and trembling. Human soldiers brought him to their command ship, the Fury itself, and presented him to their leader. Admiral Chun was not what he expected. She was old by human standards, with gray hair pulled back in a tight knot and eyes that seemed to see through everything. Her uniform was neat and precise, showing no signs of the battle that had just ended. She studied Kethvaran with an expression that revealed nothing. "You studied us," she said finally. "You read our histories and our myths. You wrote books about how weak and primitive we were." Kethvaran nodded, unable to find words. "Did you read about what happens when humanity is pushed too far?" she asked. "Did you learn about Dresden and Hiroshima? About the march to the sea? About what we did to each other before we decided to try being civilized?" He had read about all of it, and he had dismissed it as ancient history. Admiral Chun moved closer, and despite her small size, Kethvaran felt like prey before a predator. "We spent 2 centuries trying to be better," she said. "We worked so hard to evolve past what we were. We joined your Concord because we hoped we could be something new. We wanted to prove that humanity could exist without war." Her voice dropped, soft and terrible. "But here is the truth the galaxy needs to understand. We never stopped being what we were. We just kept it caged, controlled, sleeping. The Dominion woke it up, and now it is hungry." She gestured, and the view screen lit up with a new image. Beyond the burning remains of the Dominion fleet, a new human armada was emerging from fold space. Cat Varan counted ships until his mind refused to process the numbers. There had to be 10,000 vessels, maybe more, and each one was built for war. "Where did you find so many ships?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "We built them," Admiral Chun answered. "In secret. Over decades. Just in case someone ever made us remember what we truly are. Humanity has always known this day might come. We prepared." She turned to face the view screen, her reflection ghost-like against the stars. "We are not going to just defend anymore, Ambassador. We are going to find the Dominion homeworld. And we are going to show the galaxy what happens when humanity stops pretending to be civilized." Kethvaran finally found his voice. "What will you do to them?" he asked. "What will you do to the Dominion?" Admiral Chun smiled, and the expression did not reach her eyes. "Everything our myths promised," she answered. "Every terrible story. Every violent legend. Every warning that the galaxy laughed at and ignored. We will make them all come true." She looked at him directly, and he saw in her eyes the truth of what humanity really was. "You thought our stories were fantasy," she said. "You called them myths. But they were never myths, Ambassador. They were memories. And now the galaxy will have new memories of humanity. Stories that will be told for 1,000 years. Warnings that no one will ever ignore again." She turned away, dismissing him with a gesture. "Tell everyone you meet what you saw here today. Tell them about the humans who would not surrender. Tell them about the species that turned their own deaths into weapons. Tell them about the Fury and what it did to the greatest fleet in history." Her final words echoed in his mind long after he was released. "And tell them this, we are coming. Not just for the Dominion, but for everyone who ever threatened innocent worlds. Humanity is awake now, and we have remembered who we are. The galaxy will learn to fear our name, not because we want to be feared, but because fear is the only thing that stops the next Dominion from rising. We are the monsters that other monsters tell stories about. and we are done sleeping. Catvaran left the human ship and returned to what remained of the Valori, carrying a message that would reshape civilization. He had laughed at the human myths once. He would never laugh again.